This week's Monday Night Raw was the in-your-face special to compete with the return of Monday Night Football and featured big matches, big moments and big moves across brands. With news on Braun Strowman, injury to Mickie James and the ever-confusing booking of Keith Lee on the main roster, it is time for today's WWE Raw review. Raw this week started, as is becoming tradition, with Drew McIntyre. He came down to the ring, challenged Randy Orton to an ambulance match at Clash of Champions, and was interrupted by Adam Pearce, an ever-increasing public figure in the WWE. He stated that tonight Drew McIntyre would face Keith Lee, and if he lost, he would face Keith Lee instead of Randy Orton at Clash of Champions, because Randy Orton might not make it to the match. This creates a whole load of options that the WWE have available to them, most of which are good options. Throughout the night, Keith Lee had a backstage interview, Drew McIntyre had a backstage interview, and then the two came to blows in a ring, backstage, set up so that people could come to blows. This match was also the main event of the night and ended inconclusively because of the arrival of Retribution. Retribution have continued to tease with promos that they would be attacking. There was a flickering of the lights earlier in the night, which I'll get to in a bit. But tonight, instead of Mojo Rawley, it was Shane Thorne wearing the mask for the main five, and there was a lot more than just five. They did interrupt the main event to prevent it from going to a conclusive finish, which means that of the 6 matches that Keith Lee has had, only 3 of them have actually been conclusive, and one of those was a loss. Our opening match is the Street Profits as the Raw Tag Team Champions versus Cesaro and Nakamura as the SmackDown Tag Team Champions. It is a very good match, very high quality, plenty of high flying and power game from Cesaro. Dawkins actually gets more than he usually does in this match, including the pin as he picks up the win for his team. There is a couple of backstage segments, including a vignette on Mickie James reminding everyone just how good she is for her match later in the night with Asuka. Also, we have the formal breakup, I suppose, of Andrade, Garza and Zelina Vega. More on that a bit later, but Andrade and Garza do get into a scrap backstage. Also, as an aside on that, we did have Garza flirting with Lana. Lana would have a rough night. These videos are typically jam-packed full of news top to bottom, so if you do enjoy them, please remember to click like and subscribe for more. Ricochet faces off with Cedric Alexander, and this was a great segment by everyone involved. Almost everyone got a little bit of time on the microphone before the actual match, which was intense, high-flying, very high tempo, including one of the best lumbar check sells I've ever seen, and a win for Cedric Alexander. Backstage, the Hurt Business approach Adam Pearce and essentially say to him, "We're going to be hunting Retribution tonight." That plays into the main event. The Raw Women's Championship match between Asuka and Mickie James straddles the first and second hour. It's a good quality match, but it is sort of damaged by a botch late in the night. If you are tracking this match and watch the finish of it, you will see that Asuka, in attempting to lock in the Asuka lock, does not grab the arm as is typical of her. This is because Mickie James apparently did pick up an injury to her shoulder. Her intention was to continue the match. She rolled into a pinning position, but the referee, instead of pinning, decided to call it there. It was a botched decision by the referee, which was very confusing to Mickie James, who had intended to rush to a different finish. So there was some confusion, but the WWE essentially pulled the trigger early, and Zelina Vega walked out in order to challenge Asuka. That would be a great match of Clash of Champions, and I really hope this isn't the last we see of Mickie James. Bobby Lashley faces off with and defeats Eric of the Viking Raiders, a very good night for the Hurt Business. Kevin Owens cuts a promo on Aleister Black so good he may have ended Aleister Black's career. Braun Strowman appears in Raw Underground, entering the door there for a match later in the night, and MVP replaces Dolph Ziggler, who will have a match at Raw Underground, but at the time he was replaced had already recorded it several hours previous, because Raw Underground is of course still pre-recorded. Braun moving to Raw isn't technically a formal move, I have had that confirmed, however he is going to appear next week as well. His appearance at Raw Underground was quite impressive. He took on a number of people, including Ziggler, including Riddick Moss, and eventually would line up against Dabba-Kato, but that is a match that they stopped from happening so that it can happen next week. Yes, it's already been recorded. Commentary refers to the trade which saw Mandy Rose move from SmackDown to Raw, but does not tell us who has moved the other way. The match that straddled the second and third hours is the cage match between Dominic Mysterio and Seth Rollins. As usual with these two, it was incredibly high quality. It's not just that this is the quality of Seth Rollins and the quality of Dominic individually, but they also seem to have some really genuine chemistry and used the cage particularly well for a couple of spots on top of the cage, and indeed a superplex off the top into the Falcon Arrow combo. The match was eventually won by Seth Rollins, despite the fact that Buddy Murphy, who Seth had previously told not to come out to the ring, accidentally slammed the cage door on Seth's head. Seth beats down Buddy Murphy immediately after the match, and it's sort of alluded to that we may get a bit of a romantic storyline between Rey Mysterio's daughter and Buddy Murphy. I did not see that one coming. As he is walking out, and I'm going to read the exact quote here, Seth goes up to Dominic's mother, Angie Mysterio, and says, "Hell of a job you did. Hope she turns out better," in reference to her daughter. That's just high quality vicious right there. Kevin Owens faces Aleister Black and, using the medium of a dodgy light bulb, manages to pick up the win on one leg. Looks like those flickering lights might be working in his favour. Very late in the day, as in deep into the middle of the third hour, they announce that Liv Morgan and Ruby Riott will face Natalya and Lana, with Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax on commentary. The match lasts about as long as I just spent announcing it, with Liv Morgan and Ruby Riott picking up the win, and then Lana getting put through a table by Nia Jax. Because why not? Baszler and Jax are starting to exhibit some serious chemistry as a team, not just in the way that they speak, but also in the way that they act. Baszler did feed Lana to Nia Jax, and Jax put the finishing touches on after all. Finally, in the main event segment, which left me feeling very powerful because of how badass the whole segment was, and quite dizzy and sick because of all the shaky cam, Retribution interfered in the main event match between Keith Lee and Drew McIntyre, leaving Drew McIntyre's match at Clash of Champions up in the air. Retribution massively outnumbered the two men in the ring. The Hurt Business would arrive as the saving heroes despite being heels, and even they would be outnumbered, though they would hold their own, until Drew McIntyre and Keith Lee would dive over the top rope in standing sentons, well, leaping sentons I should say, to go through everyone there. Carnage. Good old-fashioned carnage. That's how you end a Raw. Monday Night Raw, in your face, was probably one of the best Raws that they've put on in a long time. The matches were very high quality, there were quite a few of them. The women's divisions were very well represented as well. We got a bit of a gimmick match with the cage match, so there was high quality wrestling, but also there was a lot of development. We saw Zelina Vega getting a lot more involved. We saw Raw pick up a win over SmackDown. We saw Braun Strowman appearing at Raw Underground. A lot happened in this week's Raw, and the real storyline that wove through everything was Keith Lee and Drew McIntyre. A lot could happen when it comes to Clash of Champions, but Keith Lee right now seems to be occupying a space where he's simply a spoiler in between Drew McIntyre and Randy Orton to keep McIntyre and Orton from constantly butting heads to a level where you get too bored of it before a match at Hell in a Cell. If this feud is going to keep going, they need things like this to act as a buffer, but I don't feel that's doing Keith Lee any favours because this once again was an inconclusive match. Let me know what you thought of Raw in the comments. Please remember to like and subscribe. I've been Tom Collihew, and thank you very much for joining me.